Hey everybody, I'm Brian from BrianKeithFitness.com, qualified personal trainer and nutritionist. Here are 6 tips to help you stop overeating. I can't stop eating. I'm hungry all of the time. If you've ever uttered either of those words, then today's video is going to help you loads. Now, overeating is a little bit of a difficult topic to unpack because there can be a lot of psychological traumas and past experiences that lead somebody to overeating. So I'm definitely not the best person qualified to speak on those particular topics. If that's you, I recommend you go to a therapist or a behavioral psychologist who specializes in overeating and binge eating disorders. Or you can listen to the podcast I did with Glenn Livingston, PhD, on this topic. But if you're someone who just struggles with day-to-day overeating and consuming too much food and too many calories, then hopefully this video will help. When it comes to overeating, I'm going to assume in this video that weight loss, fat loss, or body composition is your primary goal. So tip number 1 is eat high volume, low calorie food. One of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to nutrition is when people separate food into good and bad categories. There's no such thing as good and bad food. A piece of broccoli isn't going to save you from a burning building, and a chocolate bar is not going to stab you down a back alley. Good and bad is context dependent on the situation and the person. So when it comes to overeating and food choices, realize that some food is high nutrient and low calorie, some food is low nutrient and low calorie, and some foods are a combination of both. An example of low calorie, high nutrient food is something like vegetables, broccoli, spinach, lettuce. You can load your plate full of these foods and you'll have a large quantity of food, but actually not that many calories. So if you're struggling with portion control and you don't want to eat less food, start bulking up your plate with these lower calorie options. Not only are these foods full of nutrients, they're also quite high in fiber, which is going to make you feel fuller for longer and help keep you satiated between meals. Number 2, drink a glass of water. You'd be surprised how often I and other people confuse hunger and thirst, especially if you're working out a lot or sweating a lot throughout the day. And a good rule of thumb here is if you've eaten in the past hour or two and you've had good nutrient-dense foods and you're still hungry, try drink a glass of water and see does that curb your hunger. A good rule of thumb here is if you've had a high quality breakfast, lunch or dinner and you're still hungry an hour later, and assuming you haven't completely undereaten throughout the day, which I'll get on to later, have a drink of water or a glass of water and see if that curbs your hunger levels. It's very easy to confuse those two things, hunger and thirst. So if you have a good nutritional plan that's loaded with nutrient-dense foods and you've eaten relatively recently, you might just be thirsty. And not confusing those two can reduce the amount of times you overeat. Simple but effective. Number 3, hit your daily protein requirements, especially if you're following a workout regimen. Now, I've fallen victim to this myself. When you're working out several times a week, especially when you're following a resistance program, or some form of weightlifting program, your protein requirements go up. Every time you work out and create a lot of micro tears on your muscle fibers, you need the amino acids from protein that you eat in order to repair. And if you're finding that you can't get satiated after a meal when you're following a workout regimen, your protein might be too low. So make sure you're hitting your daily requirements. And you don't even have to calculate this to a T. A good rule of thumb is to have a high quality, complete protein source at your major meals. Eggs for breakfast, some chicken for lunch, some steak for dinner. Or if you're following a plant-based or vegan program, food combinations, combining your different plants, seeds, and legumes so you're hitting your essential amino acid targets for the day. Again, just a little bit trickier, but not impossible. You just need a little bit more nutritional knowledge or education around food and amino acids in those plant-based foods in order to do that. So if you find that you're overeating in your meals or feeling really hungry in between meals, look at your daily protein requirements. And the good news is that problem tends to fix itself very quickly. Not only that, but when you're on a fat loss journey or a body compositional plan, hitting your daily protein requirements is a must. It repairs you from your workouts, which increases your metabolic rate, which means you burn more calories throughout the day, and it means you're more lean, athletic, and toned looking. So it's a double whammy in terms of benefits. So focus on your protein requirements day to day. Number 4, eat until 80% full. Now this is a little bit of a tricky one to adopt initially, but it's a really good habit to get into, if only for a couple of weeks, to get a bit more tuned in and intuitive with your hunger signals. A lot of us will sit down to have a meal and we'll eat a little bit too quickly and we'll eat a little bit too much. And then when we take a break from eating, we find that our stomach's bloated and we're really, really full. You can get around this quite easily. 1, you can slow down your eating, which I'll get onto in the next topic. Or 2, you can try and eat until you're 80% full. And it gets you better with identifying your hunger signals. And doing that consistently over time can support you with your overeating. Again, your food choices matter a great deal here. If you're eating a lot of high processed foods with a lot of additives and extra ingredients in there, they're going to disrupt your hunger signals a little bit. The entire food industry is built on this. But when you're using mostly whole foods, complex carbohydrates, healthy fats, complete proteins, fruits and vegetables, this generally isn't a problem. So just be mindful of that and try and leave the table when you're 80% full. Number 5, slow down eating or double your chewing time. Hands up, this was probably my hardest one. For a large portion of my life, I was food for function. and food was something that gave me energy, so I would just rush down a meal and then I'd get back to work or I'd get back to whatever it is that I was doing. But that completely disrupts your hunger signals and is a recipe for overeating. So slow down or double your chewing time. So if you're eating lunch or dinner, take a bite of your food, put your knife and fork down, and then double up your chewing time. And what you'll find is if you do this consistently, you'll end up eating less at meals because you're not ramming down your food and eating too quickly. Or you're not getting into environmental bad habits that lend to overeating, which is my last point. Avoid using technology while eating. Again, between point 5 and 6, this is one that I fall victim to myself regularly. But if you're watching TV or you're focused on your device while you're consuming your food, it's going to be so much easier to overeat. So if this is something you struggle with, try avoiding technology for a week or two and see if that leads to a reduced amount of food that you're eating. Again, this is quite a tricky one to break, but can reap dividends over the long term if you get into a good habit when it comes to food. So avoid technology when you're eating, or at least experiment with it. As I said at the top of the video, there are therapists and psychologists much better to speak on this topic than me, but here are some of the tips that I've used with my clients very successfully over the years to avoid overeating at meals and in between meals. So I hope they helped you too. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for videos coming each and every week.